Real strength isn't in striking back. It's in standing still long enough to see clearly. The pause before reaction isn't hesitation. It's mastery in disguise. It's the quiet moment where emotion softens into awareness, and awareness chooses wisdom over impulse. Most people react to protect themselves, not realizing that reaction is the very thing that steals their power. The calm one sees more, says less, and moves with precision. Stillness is not weakness, it's control over chaos. When you stop letting emotions speak first, truth finally has a voice. In that pause, you are no longer pulled by noise or fear. You become deliberate, grounded, untouchable. The power hidden in that silence is the kind that cannot be forced, only felt. Welcome to the timeless power of not reacting first, where calm becomes your greatest form of strength. Chapter 1. The wisdom hidden in the space between action and impulse. The space between action and impulse is where wisdom lives. It is not wide, not loud, but it changes everything. That space is the difference between peace and regret, between reaction and understanding. Most people rush through it without noticing, driven by emotion disguised as urgency. But those who learn to pause, even for a breath, discover a power greater than instinct, the ability to see before moving. Impulse is fast because it fears silence. It tells you to speak before you think, to act before you feel, to protect before you understand. But wisdom moves slower, not out of hesitation, but because it trusts the rhythm of clarity. The pause teaches you that reacting quickly is not strength. It is surrender to emotion. Stillness, instead, is the mastery of energy before it becomes chaos. When you resist the pull of impulse, you begin to see how much power you once gave away through haste. Every unguarded word, every defensive action, every quick judgment came from the same place, fear of being misunderstood or unseen. The pause breaks that pattern. It allows awareness to walk ahead of emotion. It lets you hold the flame without burning yourself. The world glorifies speed. People call it confidence, decisiveness, leadership, yet real mastery is rarely loud or quick. It's quiet, precise, and deliberate. When you pause before reacting, you give intelligence time to rise. You shift from survival to strategy, from emotion to clarity. What feels like inaction is actually deep alignment with what's true. The pause is not passive. It's the highest form of engagement. It means you are fully aware of what is happening inside and around you, without being consumed by it. You feel the heat of anger, but choose not to feed it. You sense fear, but refuse to obey it. You learn to listen to energy instead of words, to intention instead of tone. That is emotional intelligence in its purest form. Every time you stop before acting, you open a doorway to choice. Most people think reaction is choice, but it's not. It's conditioning. The pause breaks that conditioning. It reminds you that you are not your emotions, but the one who sees them. From that awareness, even conflict becomes an opportunity to understand rather than to win. You begin to see how impulse thrives on noise. It wants to fill silence with something, anything, so that you don't have to face uncertainty. But wisdom grows in that very silence. When you stop rushing to fix, you start hearing what life is trying to show you. The lesson was never hidden. You were simply too loud to listen. That space between impulse and action is sacred because it reveals truth. It shows you what you actually value, not what you pretend to value. Do you want peace or victory, connection or control? Reaction hides this choice. Reflection exposes it. The pause is not about holding back emotion. It's about giving yourself the freedom to choose how emotion will move. Stillness is misunderstood as emptiness, but it is full of awareness. Inside it, thoughts settle like dust, and you can finally see the shape of what's real. You begin to sense patterns in your behavior, where you rush, why you defend, what you fear losing. Awareness gives you vision, and vision gives you power over reaction. Each time you pause, the space grows stronger. At first it feels unnatural, even uncomfortable. The mind will scream for action, but if you stay, if you breathe, the discomfort fades into clarity. What once felt like weakness now feels like control. The pause becomes a friend you trust to hold your strength when emotion rises. This wisdom doesn't come from suppressing feeling, but from understanding it. The pause allows emotion to exist without owning you. Anger can appear, but it passes through instead of staying. Fear can whisper, but it no longer commands. When awareness stands between feeling and expression, peace replaces regret. Impulse seeks reaction. Wisdom seeks direction. You stop asking, "How do I respond quickly?" and start asking, "Do I need to respond at all?" That question alone can dissolve entire conflicts before they begin. The silence that follows isn't empty. It's filled with meaning. The mind was too rushed to see. You realize that every time you react less, you understand more. The less you argue, the more you hear. The less you defend, the more you learn. The less you push, the more life reveals itself. The wisdom in the pause is not about control, it's about harmony. It aligns your movement with truth instead of emotion. Over time, this awareness becomes natural. You no longer pause consciously. The pause becomes your nature. You respond from groundedness instead of instinct. Your words soften, your tone stabilizes, and your presence begins to calm others. People trust those who don't react quickly because stillness radiates safety. The power of the pause also protects your energy. Every reaction drains focus, while every silence strengthens it. When you stop giving attention to what doesn't deserve it, peace becomes effortless. You begin saving energy for creation instead of confrontation. That's how stillness turns into productivity, by keeping you anchored in what truly matters. Impulse always wants to prove something. It says, "I must act so they understand me." But wisdom knows understanding is not your job. Clarity speaks for itself. When you stop defending your truth becomes louder. The pause gives your presence a voice stronger than any explanation. In the space between action and impulse, time slows down. You begin to sense life's rhythm instead of forcing it. You start feeling guided rather than pressured. That shift from reaction to awareness is the birth of inner power, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that governs the self. The deeper you move into stillness, the more peaceful your decisions become. You no longer act from pain, but from precision. Even your no becomes soft but firm. Your yes becomes intentional. Wisdom doesn't rush because it knows that clarity moves faster than impulse ever could. The pause teaches you that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the ability to remain clear within it. When you no longer rush to react, you allow reality to show its shape. Life becomes less of a battle and more of a dialogue between awareness and experience. You begin to live from response instead of reaction. And in that space, that silent breath between what happens and what you choose, you finally see the truth of mastery. It was never about controlling others or silencing emotion. It was about remembering that your power begins not when you act, but when you know why you're about to. That is the wisdom hidden in the space between action and impulse. Chapter 2. Calm is the language strength speaks in. Calm is not weakness, nor is its silence mistaken for surrender. It is the steady heartbeat beneath the chaos, the quiet rhythm that doesn't break when the world starts shouting. Real strength doesn't need to prove itself through volume. It shows itself through still presence, through the kind of control that doesn't seek attention, only understanding. The strongest souls move like deep rivers, unseen on the surface, yet powerful in their depth. True calm is not born from comfort, but from challenge. It's easy to stay composed when life is kind. It's when storms arrive that calm becomes courage. The ability to stay grounded when everything shakes is what separates strength from reaction. Calmness is the art of standing tall within, even when no one notices. It is silent power, untouched by noise. When you begin to speak through calm, your words carry a different weight. They no longer rush to be heard, they resonate. People listen not because you demand it, but because your energy commands it. Calm is not passive, it is persuasive. It bends the world toward understanding without ever needing to push. Most people confuse reaction with power. They think shouting makes them strong, that control comes from domination. But the loudest voice often hides the weakest piece. True strength never competes with chaos. It observes it until clarity appears. Calm is the language strength uses to communicate with both grace and certainty. The more you cultivate calm, the more you understand that emotion is not your enemy. Unawareness is. You can feel anger without being consumed by it, feel fear without being paralyzed, feel hurt without becoming bitter. Calm doesn't silence feeling, it gives it space to speak truth instead of pain. It turns reaction into reflection. In stillness, the mind learns to listen before deciding. You begin to see that most conflicts aren't personal. They're projections of pain. Calm gives you the vision to see beyond behavior, to sense intention. It lets you respond from understanding instead of ego. That's what makes calm stronger than defense. It chooses clarity over reaction. Strength does not need to announce itself. The calm person doesn't prove. They embody their very presence, changes the tone of a room. They don't absorb other people's storms. They hold their own weather. This kind of steadiness can't be taught through words. It's learned through awareness. You build it every time you choose patience instead of noise. Calmness gives you the ability to act from precision instead of pressure. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing only what's necessary. The calm mind cuts through confusion like a blade through mist. It doesn't waste motion or energy. Every step it takes is deliberate. Every word intentional. That is strength disguised as serenity. To speak through calm is to speak through awareness. The tone changes, the rhythm slows, and the message deepens. Calm communication carries energy that others feel before they understand. It diffuses conflict without submission and creates respect without demand. The one who remains calm becomes the one who leads, even without a title. Calm is a discipline of the mind and a decision of the heart. It requires self-control, but not suppression. You learn to pause before speaking, to breathe before reacting, to think before assuming. Each pause becomes a declaration of strength. You realize that control over yourself is far more powerful than control over anyone else. Stillness is strength because it gives you space to see what others miss. When you stop reacting instantly, you start noticing patterns in yourself, in people, in life. You begin to read energy instead of emotion. The calm mind becomes a compass. It always knows where peace is pointing. Calm doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care wisely. You no longer pour energy into arguments that go nowhere. You choose your battles not to win, but to preserve peace. That selectivity is strength. You learn that walking away isn't weakness. It's awareness that your energy is sacred. In the practice of calm, patience becomes a superpower. You no longer rush outcomes or force timing. You understand that what is meant for you will meet you when you're ready. Calm transforms waiting into trust, and trust into peace. The anxious mind seeks answers. The calm mind allows truth to arrive. Calmness also reshapes how you deal with pain. Instead of escaping it, you witness it. You hold discomfort in awareness until it teaches what it came to teach. Strength doesn't resist pain. It learns through it. The calm soul knows that healing requires feeling, but not collapsing into emotion. That quiet courage is the deepest kind of resilience. The language of calm is subtle yet powerful. It speaks in patience, in presence, in understanding. You realize that those who misunderstand your calmness are often those still trapped in reaction. You don't defend it. You let time reveal what silence always does. Truth. Calm proves itself through endurance, not argument. When you stop matching people's chaos, your peace becomes protection. Their storms can no longer reach you. You start realizing that not every battle deserves your fire. Some only require your stillness. The mind that stays calm under pressure is the mind that leads through wisdom instead of ego. Calm creates connection, where reaction creates division. It allows you to see others without judgment, to hold space without needing to fix. People feel safe around calmness because it carries no demand, no tension. It gives permission for others to soften too. That's how inner peace ripples outward, quietly but unforgettably. With time, calm becomes your language, not because you practiced it, but because you became it. It no longer feels like control. It feels like nature. You start seeing beauty, even in chaos, because peace has taught you how to find clarity in every storm. Calm is no longer something you do. It's what you are. The calm mind becomes a mirror, where truth can finally appear. You stop being distracted by noise, and the world stops feeling like an opponent. Stillness reveals the simple truth that life was never fighting you. It was waiting for you to slow down and listen. And in that listening, you discover what strength truly sounds like. Not anger, not defense, not fear, but the quiet certainty of calm that needs no explanation. It is the language of those who have learned to trust their stillness more than their noise. And in that language, peace speaks louder than power ever could. Chapter 3. The discipline of still energy. Still energy is not the absence of movement. It is the mastery of it. It's the quiet control that comes from knowing when to act and when to wait. Most people mistake energy for restlessness, as if constant motion proves aliveness. But true strength is measured in restraint. The mind that can stay still while the world spins fast has already learned the art of power without aggression. Energy without discipline becomes chaos. It bursts outward in reaction, in anxiety, in overthinking. Discipline turns that same energy into direction. It allows emotion to move through awareness rather than against it. You stop scattering yourself into every impulse and begin channeling your focus where it matters. The still mind becomes a lens. Everything it looks at becomes clear. Still energy is not lazy. It's precise. It acts from alignment, not urgency. It knows that not every movement is progress, and not every silence is weakness. This kind of awareness doesn't waste time fighting what doesn't need to be fought. It saves strength for what truly requires presence. In stillness, action becomes sacred because it is no longer random. It is intentional. Discipline begins with awareness of the self. You start observing how often you move from impulse instead of clarity. You notice how the need to react is often fear wearing the mask of strength. The more you see this pattern, the more naturally stillness grows. It is not forced, it is chosen. And through that choice, energy becomes your ally instead of your enemy. The discipline of still energy is born from patience. The undisciplined mind rushes to resolve everything, while the wise mind allows time to reveal its truth. You begin to trust that silence is not delay, but preparation. Energy held within awareness becomes more powerful than any reaction. You learn that not acting is sometimes the highest form of strength. Still energy is not stagnant. It vibrates quietly beneath calmness. You can feel it in those who have mastered themselves. They don't need to prove anything. Their presence alone shifts the room. That stillness carries gravity. It attracts, steadies, and influences without force. It's what people mean when they say someone has power without words. To cultivate still energy, you must first make peace with not knowing. The restless mind craves certainty. Stillness allows curiosity. You stop chasing control and start listening. This listening turns movement inward, transforming reaction into reflection. You begin to see that control is not about dominance. It's about direction guided by awareness. Discipline teaches you that restraint is not suppression. You are not pushing energy down. You are refining it. It's like holding fire without letting it burn you. The flame still burns, but now it lights your path instead of consuming you. Through stillness, passion becomes precision. Every emotion is energy, asking to be understood. When you stay still, you give that emotion space to reveal its message. Anger becomes clarity, fear becomes focus, grief becomes depth. The disciplined mind doesn't rush to escape emotion. It listens to what emotion came to teach. Still energy transforms pain into insight. The untrained mind reacts to every disturbance. The disciplined mind absorbs and releases without damage. It's not numbness. It's strength built through awareness. You stop personalizing everything. Stop turning every situation into a battlefield. You begin to sense that most chaos exists only because you engage it. The moment you stop feeding it, it fades. Still energy allows you to move with elegance. You don't need to rush, yet everything still gets done. You don't need to dominate, yet you always lead. Your discipline gives you balance, firm yet soft, deliberate yet natural. People feel it, even if they can't explain it. That's the unseen influence of quiet power. Discipline also demands consistency. Stillness is not a single act. It's a way of living. You learn to return to your center over and over again, especially when emotions pull. Every pause becomes training. Every silence a form of strength. Over time your reactions soften, your words sharpen, and your energy stabilizes. Still energy is how wisdom expresses itself through the body. It's the ability to stay steady under pressure, to move slowly when others rush, to breathe when others shout. You stop being a slave to emotion and start becoming its guide. That shift changes everything: your relationships, your focus, your peace. The disciplined mind does not chase recognition. It knows that silence is often misunderstood by those who need noise to feel alive. But the calm mind understands that peace is a language only a few can hear. You stop seeking validation and start living in quiet alignment with truth. That's how stillness becomes strength without needing an audience. Still energy makes your presence sharper, your perception deeper. You start noticing details that rushing minds miss. You see patterns forming before outcomes appear. Because you are no longer distracted by reaction, your awareness expands. This foresight becomes one of your greatest advantages, born not from force, but from still attention. Even in action, stillness remains. You move, but not from agitation. Every gesture, every word carries intention. You no longer waste effort trying to be seen. You allow your energy to speak. That quiet certainty disarms conflict, invites trust, and builds influence. It's the power that needs nothing to prove itself. Discipline means mastering not just your emotions, but also your timing. You begin to act in alignment with life, instead of against it. The impatient mind forces, the disciplined mind flows. You start recognizing when energy calls for stillness, and when stillness calls for movement. That awareness is what makes your actions effective. Still energy is spiritual and practical at once. It gives clarity to thought, focus to effort, and grace to behavior. It's the difference between reacting from ego and responding from awareness. It is the discipline of holding your energy so wisely that nothing external can dictate your peace. As you continue practicing stillness, your relationship with life shifts. You stop seeing it as something to control and start seeing it as something to cooperate with. You begin to trust the rhythm of existence, the quiet cycles of rise and fall, flow and pause. The discipline of still energy aligns you with that rhythm instead of resisting it. And in that alignment, strength no longer feels like tension. It feels like freedom. You become unshakable, not because you are rigid, but because you are rooted. The energy you once scattered in reaction now moves through intention. The world still moves, but you remain centered, calm, deliberate, and quietly powerful. This is the discipline of still energy. Chapter 4. When presence becomes more powerful than words. Presence is a kind of language that doesn't need translation. It speaks before words arrive. It stays after they fade, and it says more through silence than speech ever could. Most people spend their lives trying to be heard. Few ever learn how to truly be felt. The power of presence isn't in expression, it's in attention. When you are completely here, even without speaking, the space around you listens. Words can reach the mind, but presence reaches the soul. It carries a quiet gravity that steadies everyone. It touches. You can recognize it instantly. The calm in a leader, the comfort of a healer, the still gaze of someone who sees without judgment. They don't need to speak much, because their energy already says, "You are safe here." That's the language only awareness can speak. To develop presence, you first have to stop dividing your attention. The mind that keeps running between past and future cannot radiate stillness. Presence happens when you withdraw energy from overthinking and return it to the now. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, and the noise fades into distance. What remains is awareness, pure, quiet, complete. Presence begins with listening, not just to others, but to life itself. It means hearing the spaces between words, the tone beneath speech, the emotions behind faces. When you listen with your full being, people feel understood without explanation. They may not remember what you said, but they'll remember how your stillness made them feel. When you carry presence, conversations stop being battles for dominance. You no longer wait for your turn to speak. You listen to understand. You stop filling silence with words because you realize silence itself holds truth. The mind becomes less defensive, the heart more open. The dialogue shifts from reaction to connection. Presence is felt most strongly in restraint. It's in the pause before you respond, the calm gaze when others expect anger, the quiet patience that refuses to match chaos. When you stay still inside while the world demands reaction, your energy begins to lead. You don't overpower others. You influence them through steadiness. True presence doesn't perform. It aligns. It doesn't need charm or persuasion. It arises naturally when you stop pretending and start simply being. The authentic self has no need for decoration. When you show up as you are, fully attentive, People sense truth without needing to be convinced. Presence becomes your silent credibility. Even in conflict, presence becomes your greatest power. Arguments lose their heat when met with awareness. The other person may shout, accuse, or project, but the energy of your stillness absorbs none of it. You don't mirror their chaos, you anchor it. The calm energy that holds space without resistance disarms everything that feeds on reaction. Presence also transforms how you lead. A leader who carries awareness doesn't push people, they inspire them. Their steadiness becomes a source of trust. People naturally follow those whose presence makes them feel balanced. It's not charisma that moves others. It's the quiet assurance of someone who sees clearly and acts from calmness. The power of presence extends beyond interaction. It changes how you live. Every task, no matter how small, gains depth when you give it your full attention. Washing a dish, walking in silence, or even breathing can become an act of meditation. Presence turns ordinary moments into sacred ones, because awareness is what makes life feel alive. You begin to see that the mind's endless commentary was never adding clarity, it was covering it. When you stop narrating life and start experiencing it directly, everything feels more vivid. You don't need to label moments to find meaning. You feel their meaning by being inside them. Presence is the difference between observing life and living it. People often think power is expressed through dominance, but true power expresses through peace. Presence doesn't compete. It connects. It doesn't try to control outcomes. It influences them through calm certainty. You no longer force things into place. You let awareness arrange them naturally. The results come not from effort, but from alignment. Presence also heals. When you sit in stillness with your own emotions, they begin to unfold without resistance. You don't rush to fix them or explain them away. You simply allow them to exist. That permission becomes transformation. What you once avoided becomes integrated. What you once feared becomes understood. When presence becomes your natural state, words become fewer but deeper. You stop speaking from ego and start speaking from clarity. Each word you choose carries weight because it comes from still awareness, not reaction. People start feeling your energy before you even open your mouth, and that energy speaks louder than language. The secret of presence is sincerity. You can't fake stillness. It comes from real peace. The more honest you are with yourself, the more naturally calm you become. That authenticity radiates outward. Presence doesn't ask for respect. It earns it through quiet consistency. People feel truth, even when they can't explain it. In moments of tension, presence is what steadies you. The world may try to pull you into its speed, but you've learned to move from awareness, not pressure. You don't rush, yet you're never late. You don't argue, yet you're never unheard. Your calmness becomes both shield and signal, protection and guidance at once. The power of presence deepens when you stop seeking approval. You realize that being grounded is more valuable than being liked. Approval fades, but alignment stays. The more you rest in awareness, the less you need external validation. You stop performing life and start living it from the center of stillness. Presence connects you to everything without needing to possess anything. You feel part of the whole, not above it. That humility becomes peace. You stop forcing outcomes because you trust that life is intelligent enough to move in its rhythm. In that trust, presence grows effortlessly, like breathing. When you understand presence, you understand that silence is not the absence of communication. It's its purest form. Your energy begins to speak louder than any argument. Stillness becomes your voice, clarity, your expression, peace, your signature. And in that calm, wordless awareness, you finally see what power truly means. Not the power to control, but the power to influence through peace. Presence becomes your strength, your protection, your truth. And in a world that worships noise, the one who remains still becomes the one who truly leads. Chapter 5. Holding fire without letting it burn you. Anger, passion, and emotion are all forms of fire. They are neither good nor bad, only powerful. Fire gives light, warmth, and movement, but it also destroys when left untamed. To hold fire without letting it burn you is to master the balance between feeling deeply and staying conscious. It's the art of being fully alive without losing control of your inner world. Every person carries their own flame. For some, it burns quietly, guiding purpose. For others, it rages, consuming everything in its path. The difference lies not in the emotion itself, but in awareness. The fire is not your enemy. Ignorance is when you learn to meet emotion without fear or suppression. The same fire that once destroyed you begins to illuminate you. Most people try to control emotion through resistance, pushing it down, denying its existence. But suppressed fire always finds a way to escape. It leaks through words, through tension, through habits. The wise don't extinguish the flame. They learn to hold it. They understand that emotion is not meant to be fought, only guided. Awareness becomes the container that keeps the fire from spreading. Holding fire means staying awake inside feeling. It means you can feel anger rise without reacting, passion ignite without losing focus, pain ache without collapsing. This balance is the discipline of the soul. You don't silence emotion, you listen to it. You let it speak, but you decide when it's done talking. The fire becomes your servant, not your master. Anger often disguises itself as strength. It makes you feel powerful, decisive, alive. But uncontrolled fire blinds more than it reveals. It makes you act fast and see narrow. True power lies in awareness that feels everything, yet chooses what to express. The one who can stand inside the flame without lashing out has already won the battle most never fight. Stillness is the water that cools fire without extinguishing it. When you bring calm awareness into emotion, it changes form. Anger turns to clarity. Desire turns to direction. Fear turns to wisdom. The energy doesn't disappear. It evolves. This transformation happens naturally when you stop identifying with emotion and start observing it. Fire without purpose burns through everything. But fire held within intention becomes creation. Every great transformation in life comes from this balance. Enough passion to move, enough awareness to guide. The artist, the healer, the thinker, the leader, all use their inner fire as light, not as fuel for destruction. Learning to hold fire means learning to be with discomfort. Emotion will always try to move you. That's its nature. But awareness teaches you to pause inside the movement. You breathe through the heat until it becomes bearable. With time, you discover that no emotion can harm you once you stop running from it. The fear of fire burns more than the fire itself. The mind often labels emotion as dangerous because it cannot control what it doesn't understand. But emotions are messages, not threats. They carry intelligence when seen clearly. Anger tells you where boundaries were crossed. Sadness shows you where connection was lost. Love reminds you of what matters. When you hold emotion consciously, its message is heard before it becomes chaos. To master emotion is not to remain calm all the time, but to remain aware all the time. You can let yourself feel rage, heartbreak, longing, and still keep your center intact. You begin to notice how the body reacts, how breath changes, how thoughts tighten. Awareness becomes your grounding point, anchoring you while the emotion passes through. Fire teaches humility. It reminds you that intensity without direction can burn the very things you wish to protect. The ego believes that reaction is release, but release without wisdom is waste. Holding fire is learning to carry heat with patience, to let emotion mature before it becomes action. That pause is where transformation begins. Still energy gives the fire form. Without awareness, emotion is noise. With awareness, it becomes music. The rhythm of the heart, the breath, the body, all move in harmony when you no longer resist what you feel. Holding fire doesn't mean cold detachment. It means warm consciousness. It is passion, held by peace. Many fear their emotions because they have only met them in chaos. But when you finally sit with your fire, you see it differently. You notice that what once frightened you also fuels your growth. That heat becomes courage. That passion becomes purpose. You stop fearing intensity and start honoring it as part of your design. Every great act of growth demands heat. The heat of discomfort, of uncertainty, of surrender. Fire refines metal, and emotion refines character. When you hold your fire wisely, pain becomes purification. It burns away illusions, pride, and fear, leaving behind something clearer, the strength to stay open in a world that teaches you to close. Stillness is not the opposite of fire. It is its balance. Too much control, and the flame dies. Too little, and it destroys. Wisdom is learning when to fan the flame and when to protect it. You stop letting every emotion dictate your movement. Instead, you begin moving with awareness, using energy as a tool instead of a reaction. Holding fire also means holding compassion for yourself and others. Everyone burns differently. Some hide their flame, some lose it, some let it consume them. You learn not to judge, but to understand. When you've faced your own fire, you stop fearing the flames in others. You meet them with empathy instead of resistance. The discipline of holding fire is a lifelong practice. You will fail at times. You will react. You will feel consumed. But every return to awareness makes the fire clearer. Over time, you learn that control isn't suppression. It's partnership. You and your emotions move together, no longer as enemies, but as allies in understanding. When you can hold fire and stay soft, you've discovered real power. You can feel intensity without breaking, passion without obsession, anger without cruelty. This balance is what turns emotion into wisdom. You realize you don't have to choose between strength and sensitivity. They were meant to coexist all along. Fire held with awareness becomes light. It stops burning through your peace and begins illuminating your path. You stop fearing emotion and start walking with it, hand in hand, as teacher and friend. This is the discipline of maturity. To burn without being consumed, to feel deeply without losing your center. And in that awareness, you realize fire is not what destroys you, it's what awakens you. When you can hold it without flinching, you stop being afraid of your own depth. You see that everything powerful inside you only needed guidance, not suppression. The flame was never the problem. The absence of awareness was. Now you burn, not to destroy, but to shine. Chapter 6. How stillness changes what power means. Power is often mistaken for control, the ability to bend things, people, and outcomes to one's will. The world measures power by movement, by dominance, by how loudly it can assert itself. But stillness teaches another definition, one that does not rely on force, but on awareness. True power is not about control, it's about presence. The more still you become, the more you see that power is not what you hold, it's what you stop needing. The restless seek power because they feel incomplete. They believe that control over others can fix the chaos within themselves. But stillness reveals that the only mastery worth having is mastery of one's own state. When you are still inside, no one can disturb you. You no longer need to prove, to defend, or to chase. That calm detachment is not weakness, it's unshakable freedom. Stillness changes power because it removes fear from the equation. Fear creates reaction, and reaction creates noise. When you operate from stillness, fear loses its influence. You don't rush to answer. You don't panic to protect. You don't cling to outcomes. You act not because you must, but because you choose. Every decision becomes deliberate, clean, and strong. Power rooted in stillness doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't need to announce itself or seek validation. It simply is, quiet, steady, undeniable. The calm person influences more by presence than others do by force. This kind of power isn't theatrical, it's magnetic. People trust those who remain calm when everything else trembles. The still mind sees clearly, and clarity itself is strength. When your mind is calm, you perceive beyond surface noise. You recognize truth behind words, emotion behind behavior, patterns behind events. Stillness allows power to come from understanding, not from reaction. It is not about conquering, it's about perceiving accurately. Control is fragile because it depends on circumstance. Stillness is unbreakable because it depends only on awareness. The one who relies on control loses peace when the world changes. The one who lives from stillness remains unshaken no matter how unpredictable life becomes. Real power, therefore, is not what dominates life. It's what stays balanced inside it. Stillness changes how you respond to pressure. The reactive mind tries to fix things immediately, fearing what silence might reveal. But the still mind waits, listens, and moves only when alignment appears. It doesn't rush, yet it is never late. That timing, precise and effortless, is a power that no force can match. When you operate from stillness, you stop engaging in unnecessary battles. You no longer waste energy proving your worth or explaining your decisions. Power becomes conservation, the ability to hold your energy instead of leaking it into conflict. Silence becomes your armor, and understanding your sword. Stillness also transforms ambition. The old version of power chased outcomes, titles, victories, recognition. The new power doesn't chase, it attracts. When your energy is calm and aligned, the right things move toward you naturally. Stillness replaces pursuit with presence. Success becomes a reflection of your inner order, not your outer struggle. The more you live in stillness, the more you understand that power is not noise but depth. The loud ego wants to be seen. Awareness wants to see. You stop trying to control perception and begin shaping reality through intention. Every action becomes infused with quiet authority, not because you force it, but because you no longer doubt it. Stillness teaches humility. You realize that true power is not personal. It flows through you when you stop trying to own it. You become a vessel, not an owner. This humility expands your influence because it carries no resistance. People are drawn to your calmness because it feels like safety. That's how stillness leads without command. Power, without stillness, is unstable. It rises fast and falls faster because it is built on reaction. But power grounded in awareness lasts. It doesn't depend on emotion or applause. It moves quietly, like a tide, shaping everything it touches without needing to be seen. You realize that strength without stillness is force, and force eventually breaks. The still person understands that silence is not the absence of power, it is its maturity. You don't need to respond to every challenge or defend every truth. Some things don't deserve your energy, and some lessons reveal themselves only in quiet. Stillness turns reaction into strategy and tension into grace. Stillness gives birth to compassion. The calm mind no longer sees others as threats or obstacles. It understands that everyone is fighting unseen battles. Power softens when it matures. It stops needing to dominate and starts wanting to understand. Stillness transforms power into influence that heals rather than harms. When you live in awareness, power becomes effortless. You no longer push outcomes. You align with them. You begin trusting that timing and truth have their own intelligence. What you once tried to control now flows toward you naturally, because your energy no longer resists life. The universe listens more clearly to those who are quiet inside. The still mind creates stability in others. Your calm becomes contagious. People mirror your energy, not your words. That is leadership at its highest form. Not authority through command, but influence through alignment. Stillness becomes a frequency that changes the room without trying. Even in conflict, stillness remains undefeated. The one who does not react cannot be manipulated. The one who does not rush cannot be misled. The one who listens before speaking becomes impossible to overpower. In this way, stillness turns vulnerability into wisdom and patience into precision. Stillness also gives power a moral direction. Without awareness, strength can easily become cruelty. But when consciousness guides action, power serves rather than controls. You stop asking, "How can I win?" and start asking, "How can I align?" This shift from ego to awareness redefines leadership entirely. You begin to see that stillness doesn't take away your drive, it refines it. You still pursue goals, but without obsession. You still feel emotion, but without chaos. You still act with strength, but without hostility. Stillness makes you unstoppable, not by adding more energy, but by removing wasteful motion. And in that still power, life stops feeling like a contest. You no longer need to outshine or outlast anyone. You simply remain calm, clear, aware. The world keeps spinning, people keep reacting, but you move through it like water through fire, untouched, deliberate, free. That is what stillness does to power. It turns it from control into clarity, from dominance into grace. True power doesn't fight. It simply stands so firmly in awareness that nothing can move it. Chapter 7. The Grace of Delayed Reactions. Patience is not just waiting. It is wisdom dressed in time. The grace of delayed reactions lies in the understanding that silence often reveals more than speech, and that not every moment requires an immediate answer. The world glorifies quick replies and fast opinions, but awareness teaches that response without reflection is noise. Grace begins the moment you choose not to be rushed by emotion. Delayed reactions are not signs of indifference, but of mastery. It takes strength to hold space between what happens and what you decide to do about it. In that quiet interval, truth gathers form, emotion settles, ego softens, and clarity begins to whisper. What you see clearly after waiting is always more accurate than what you feel in the first surge of reaction. Stillness doesn't erase emotion. It allows emotion to ripen. The first feeling that rises is often the most fragile. Anger that masks hurt, fear that hides love, pride that covers pain. When you delay reaction, you give yourself time to meet the real emotion beneath the surface. That awareness transforms conflict into understanding and impulsiveness into insight. Most of what you regret in life began with haste. Words spoken in heat, decisions made in panic, judgments passed without thought. The pause breaks that pattern. It teaches you that not everything deserves an instant reply, that silence can protect what reaction might destroy. The mind that waits before responding becomes its own guardian. The grace of delayed reaction is not hesitation. It is trust. It is trusting that truth will remain even if you do not defend it right away. It is believing that time, not argument, reveals character. When you delay, you create room for alignment. When you rush, you create distortion. Time becomes your ally when you stop fearing it. Every emotion arrives with urgency, demanding to be expressed, but expression without awareness becomes waste. The wise learn to feel fully yet respond slowly. They know that maturity is not about suppressing emotion, but about integrating it before it moves. The reaction that comes after understanding is calm, measured, and purposeful. Grace lives in the pause where others expect chaos. When you hold that space, you surprise not only them, but yourself. You discover that peace can exist even inside conflict. You realize you don't have to answer anger with anger or meet pressure with panic. The delay reveals a truth that reaction hides, that you are not your emotion, but the witness of it. Delaying reaction is also an act of compassion. It gives others the gift of your understanding, rather than the punishment of your assumption. When you wait before judging, you create space for empathy. You begin to see that everyone speaks through their own pain, and most of what they say is not about you. Patience becomes grace when it replaces offense with perspective. The ego fears delay because it wants control. It believes that quick responses prove intelligence or strength, but wisdom moves at a slower rhythm. It doesn't hurry truth. It allows it to unfold. When you stop trying to win the moment, you start winning your peace. The need to be right fades, replaced by the desire to be clear. Every delayed reaction strengthens your inner balance. You start noticing how silence disarms chaos, how calm weakens aggression. When you don't react immediately, you regain control of the narrative inside you. You start responding from choice, not compulsion. Each pause becomes an act of quiet rebellion against emotional gravity. Time becomes a mirror. When you delay, it reflects your patterns. What triggers you, what moves you, what drains you. In that mirror, you start learning yourself. You see where impatience hides fear, where reactivity hides wounds. The pause becomes not just a moment of peace, but a teacher of truth. The grace of delayed reactions also protects relationships. Words cannot be unsaid, but they can be unspoken. When you hold your fire long enough, the need to use it often disappears. You begin to realize that not every disagreement needs a victor, and not every silence needs to be filled. Peace often enters through the door you left closed. Delaying reaction also changes how you experience conflict. You no longer see it as a threat, but as information. The body reacts, the mind observes, and the heart interprets. You wait for these three to align before you move. That alignment turns impulsive reaction into conscious response, and conscious response turns tension into understanding. When you stop rushing to reply, you start listening more deeply. Silence becomes your foundation, and from it, your awareness expands. You hear not just what is said, but what is meant. You sense energy behind words, truth behind performance. The more you listen, the less you need to react, because understanding dissolves the need for defense. The power of a delayed reaction is in its unpredictability. People expect you to react quickly when you don't. They lose their control over your emotions. Stillness confuses aggression because it feeds on response. Grace starves conflict by refusing to entertain it. You realize that composure is the most disarming form of power. Patience in reaction also allows life to reveal its own answers. What once demanded immediate action often resolves itself when given space. Time clarifies what pressure distorts. you begin to see that waiting is not wasting. It's witnessing the wisdom of unfolding. Life, when trusted, always organizes itself better than the mind can. Every delayed reaction strengthens your relationship with yourself. You stop betraying your peace for temporary satisfaction. You learn that the mind's speed is not your pace. Your awareness becomes your rhythm. Your breath becomes your anchor. You no longer chase moments. You shape them through calm attention. The grace of waiting teaches you that silence has power. You don't lose authority by being quiet. You gain it. People begin to notice that your words come from clarity, not impulse. They trust your presence more than your opinion. That quiet credibility is the kind of influence only awareness can create. Grace appears most vividly in those who have mastered timing. You can feel it in their patience, in their tone, in their gentle certainty. They are not slow, they are deliberate. Their delay is not hesitation. It is understanding in progress. They move when truth has ripened, not when emotion demands it. The grace of delayed reactions becomes a way of living, a steady reminder that peace is not found in speed, but in space. When you learn to pause between stimulus and response, you reclaim your freedom from impulse. You become a mirror of calm in a world addicted to reaction. That is grace. The quiet art of choosing clarity over chaos and understanding over haste. Chapter 8. When you choose peace instead of proof. The search for proof is born from insecurity. The choice of peace comes from knowing. Most of life's noise comes from the need to prove something. Your worth, your strength, your rightness, your story. But peace asks a quieter question. What if you no longer needed to prove anything at all? When you release that need, an entire weight leaves your soul. You stop performing life and start living it. Proving yourself is exhausting because it turns every interaction into a stage. You measure your value by reactions, approval, or understanding. Yet proof is never enough. The mind always asks for more. The more you chase validation, the farther you drift from peace. True confidence doesn't shout to be seen. It rests in the still knowing of its own presence. Peace begins when you realize that proof is a trap. It promises recognition, but demands your serenity in exchange. The ego thrives on being right. The soul thrives on being real. To choose peace instead of proof is to stop arguing with what is and start trusting what you are. It is surrender, not of strength, but of unnecessary struggle. When you stop trying to prove yourself, silence becomes your ally. You start speaking less and understanding more. You no longer rush to correct others' views of you because you see that opinions are mirrors of perception, not truth. The peace that follows this detachment feels strange at first, but soon it becomes the only power worth keeping. Proving always comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, unseen, or unworthy. But peace has no such fear. It doesn't defend itself because it doesn't need to. The one who is at peace cannot be provoked into proving. Their calmness becomes their statement, their energy, their evidence. The more you let go of needing to be believed, the freer you become. Choosing peace doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care wisely. You stop giving energy to arguments that only deepen misunderstanding. You begin to understand that peace is not passive. It's selective. It's knowing what deserves your voice and what deserves your silence. You start saving your breath for moments that build rather than destroy. When you choose peace, the battlefield of ego dissolves. You no longer fight to win. You listen to understand. You stop reacting to every misunderstanding and start observing them like clouds passing through the sky. You realize that being misjudged doesn't reduce your truth, and being praised doesn't increase it. What is real remains real, even in silence. Peace gives you perspective. The more you try to prove, the smaller your world becomes. The more you let go, the wider your vision grows. You start to see that life doesn't need your defense. It needs your awareness. The same situation that once demanded your reaction now becomes a teacher of calmness. You stop controlling the narrative and start mastering your energy. When you stop proving, your relationships transform. You no longer argue to be heard. You listen to connect. You don't demand others to see your worth. You demonstrate it through your peace. Those who truly see you will never need convincing, and those who don't never could be convinced anyway. Letting go of proof creates room for authentic connection. The need for proof often hides the fear of rejection. The ego trembles at silence because silence cannot be manipulated. But peace teaches that rejection is not failure, it's redirection. You begin to see that not everyone is meant to understand you, and that's perfectly fine. When you release the grip of expectation, calmness enters like light through an open window. Peace also changes how you communicate. Your words stop coming from defense and start coming from clarity. You no longer speak to dominate, but to share. The tone softens. But the truth deepens. What you say begins to carry more weight, because it's no longer trying to persuade, it simply expresses what is. When you choose peace, you stop competing with noise. The world may still argue, explain, justify, but you stand still, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. You see that truth doesn't rush. It reveals itself over time. Stillness becomes your proof. Your calm becomes your answer. People begin to trust your silence more than they ever trusted your words. Choosing peace is also choosing freedom from reaction. You no longer give away your emotional balance every time someone misunderstands you. Instead of trying to correct the world, you correct your focus. You protect your peace, not by building walls, but by recognizing what no longer needs your attention. That discipline is power in disguise. The mind that seeks proof always feels incomplete. The heart that chooses peace feels whole. You no longer need external confirmation to feel valid. You start living from alignment instead of validation. Your self-worth stops fluctuating with opinions because it's rooted in awareness, not applause. Peace also deepens your understanding of strength. The strongest person is not the one who wins every argument, but the one who doesn't need to enter them. The one who can walk away with grace, knowing that silence is not surrender, it's mastery. You learn that proving may satisfy the ego, but peace nourishes the soul. To choose peace is to stop forcing closure. Not every misunderstanding deserves resolution, and not every conflict needs completion. Sometimes, the most mature response is to let things remain unfinished. The silence that follows that choice is not emptiness, it's sacred space. That's where true healing grows. You realize that peace is not a reaction. It's a position, it's the place within you untouched by chaos, where you observe without absorbing. From there, life becomes clearer. You stop fighting to be understood, and in that quiet understanding finds you. The energy you once spent proving now returns as presence. The grace of peace is that it doesn't argue. It simply remains, and you don't convince people of your integrity. You embody it. You don't explain your truth. You live it. Peace is not loud because it doesn't need to be. It holds its ground without defense. And in doing so, it outlasts every storm. And when you finally choose peace over proof, you discover the greatest power of all, the power to remain whole in a world that keeps asking you to fragment yourself. You no longer chase validation. You radiate self-trust. You stop needing to be right and start being real. And that calm, unwavering truth becomes the quiet revolution that no argument can defeat. In the quietest second between what happens and how you respond, your entire life can change. That pause, invisible to the rushing world, is where awareness meets choice. It's not about silence for silence sake, but about reclaiming your ability to move from clarity instead of compulsion. The one who doesn't rush to react begins to see what most people never do, that peace isn't the absence of challenge, it's the mastery of self within it. When you learn to live from that still center, life no longer pulls you into every storm. You begin to watch the world with gentler eyes, to sense emotion without becoming it. What used to provoke you becomes your teacher. What once drained you becomes your mirror. In that calm awareness, power shifts from trying to control the outside to understanding the inside. The strength of stillness is not in what it avoids, but in what it allows. It allows truth to rise before ego speaks. It allows wisdom to guide before impulse acts. It allows peace to shape moments that chaos once ruled. The pause becomes your quiet revolution, the space where reaction dies and understanding is born. You will find that the less you react, the more influence you carry. People will sense something in your presence that cannot be imitated, a calm gravity, a rare steadiness. You'll stop trying to win arguments, because you'll already be standing where victory truly lives, in awareness. The still mind no longer fights for power, it becomes power itself. And so when the next test arrives, when emotion swells, when words sting, when the world provokes, remember this truth: nothing outside you deserves more control than the peace within you. Breathe, watch, wait, let your awareness rise before your reaction does. For in that pause you don't just protect your calm, you redefine what strength really means. That is the timeless power of not reacting first. The quiet art of leading your life from the stillness that others have yet to discover.